Hi, everybody. Dr. Nayo again here with another wellness nugget for Rupa Health University. So today, let's dig in and let's talk about probiotics. And let's specifically talk about what a powerhouse they are. There are a multitude of things that we know that our microbiome, which is made up by different organisms that we call probiotics, can help with. But did you realize that your microbiome is really impacting more than your gut health? For instance, did you know that the gut bugs that are living in your gut actually contribute to your mental health and state of well-being? Did you also know that they play a role in your stress response and are influenced by the degree of stress that you're involved in? Also, did you know they impact your cognitive function, so how clearly and easily you're able to mentate? The other things that you also may not be aware of is that they very strongly impact heart health, inflammation, and your immune system response. They also significantly can impact someone's pain response to the degree to which they experience pain versus they're able to tolerate pain. They play a role in us optimizing our weight. And there are just so many other different things that the microbiome is profoundly intertwined with in supporting wellness. So with that said, you may have heard a term leaky gut. But have you ever heard or thought of the fact that the brain barrier can also be leaky as well? And so there's a school of thought now that when you're having a more leaky gut, which simply just means the gap junctions that make up the tube in our GI tract, they can be widened with stress or damage from medications, foods, different things that are irritating to our GI tract. And as those gap junctions open, your gut gets leakier and leakier, which usually goes along with inflammation and eventually illness or disease. But did you know that we also have a blood-brain barrier that is protecting our brain from different toxins, substances, etc.? And what we're now starting to learn more and more about is that that barrier can be breached inappropriately too, and sometimes we see that tied to the health of our gut and microbiome. And so there's no question at this point that there is a definitive relationship between the gut and the brain, and we call this the gut-brain axis. So how is this relevant to you? Why do you care? Well, if your gut is on fire, that means that your brain may also become on fire, and that can show up as your body having more of a challenge with the brain, so the cognitive function or mental health. The metabolites of the organisms that are down there can start to become irritating. We can also have more inflammation, and we can register that or pick that up by different chemicals like cytokines, which are different immune markers that are involved in the immune or inflammatory response. There's also another one called LPS that we see different organisms can make. We also know that when the microbiome and the gut are not healthy, we can see a change or an upregulation, meaning an increase in our stress response. So we can see the HP axis, which helps govern our stress response, be more upregulated in response to the stress of an unhealthy gut microbiome and therefore immune system and sometimes brain. We also know that neurotransmitter production, a lot of that actually occurs in the gut. So when the gut becomes more unhealthy, that can actually impact the neurotransmitters that are meant to be regulating mood, just sense of well-being, sleep, etc. And then there's the obvious, which is if our gut is leaky, we may not be able to absorb nutrients as well as if we had optimal gut health. Why that's relevant for the brain in terms of cognitive function, mood, and other mental health issues is that we may not have the nutrients that our brain needs for those functions. So amino acids, specific vitamins, nutrients like choline, a lot of those may not be optimally absorbed if the gut's not healthy, and that directly can influence the brain response. So leaky gut, leaky brain, this means that if an unhealthy gut could be supporting imbalance in your cognitive function, your mood, etc., could healthy organisms support a healthier cognitive response and as well as mental health? And so what's being looked into this more and more is that as we change and influence favorably the growth of healthy probiotics in the gut, you may be able to impact anxiety, depression, and even a heightened experience with stress. You may not have that same experience with a healthier microbiome. So there's this new developing concept known as psychobiotics. And these specifically are organisms that support favorable function in terms of mental health. So there was a small study that was looked at where different blends of probiotic strains were given, and they compared how those individuals responded to those who received a placebo. The group that did get the probiotics over 4 weeks reported less experience of sadness when they compared it to the placebo. So that's a very short-term study to see that impact over 4 weeks. That it's a correlation, but it's a definite effect that we should really be looking at further. So did you know that when you're stressed, you may decrease healthy gut bugs, and in particular, lactobacillus and bifidobacterium? You may also decrease your ability to produce a protective antibody called SIgA, which stands for secretory IgA, immunoglobulin A. And that's your first line of defense in terms of your immune system. So just by being stressed, you're kind of throwing to the side some of your helpers, those two bacteria or two organisms, lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, and then a really important antibody. And it's interesting because if you ever work with a functional medicine provider, these are things that we're looking at. Do you have enough lactobacillus, which is protective? Do you have enough bifidobacterium, which is protective? And we always look at your secretory IgA levels on your stool analysis. So to directly correlate that when you're stressed, you may be negatively impacting these friends, that's significant and should be considered. The other thing that one study pulled out is that when you're stressed, you definitively likely will have increased catecholamines. So those are the neurotransmitters and chemicals that influence your stress response. So there's some of the chemicals that flood your system when you're stressed. And those chemicals called catecholamines can increase the growth of gram-negative organisms, and specifically Yersinia and Pseudomonas. Why that matters is the more that you have these gram-negative organisms that support what we call dysbiosis or imbalance in the gut, that actually is starting to throw your GI tract, microbiome, immune system, and possibly brain health off as well. Did you know when you're angry or in a state of fear, you may increase a less favorable organism called Bacteroides fragilis? And so this is another one that we want to make sure that we have enough of the good guys, lactobacillus, bifidobacterium, certain strains of E. coli, and we don't want to be flooding our system with these other guys that are not as favorable. So it's just a note to really say that when I'm in a state of fear, when I'm in a state of anger, when I'm stressed, I'm actually directly influencing the growth of different organisms that could be protective for me. And we intuitively know this because when you get really stressed, anxious, or just something is feeling off in your state of being, people's stomachs tighten up. Some people actually get diarrhea. Some people get stomach pain. So this is just now being proven in science, what we've known all along experientially. So this is a nice little summary of a couple studies that I saw recently from a colleague who gathered many studies that actually favorably influence mental health and cognition. So the first one that we see here is that it looked at a group of humans who were healthy receiving these strains of probiotics, a strain of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. These are generally both protective. And they found that the group of people on these probiotics had less psychological distress. So that's, again, kind of reiterating what we spoke to a few minutes ago. This is another study that looked at students who were having academic stress, and they gave them this strain of Lactobacillus casei. And what they found was that the people who received this strain of lactobacillus had less GI symptoms in response to stress. And then this next one is about cognition. They looked at patients who had the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and those receiving the probiotic strains had improved cognitive function. And these are the strains. So it's a couple of lactobacilli strains and a bifidobacterium strain. And then this last one was a group of healthy student athletes who got this strain of Lactobacillus gasseri. Eventually, on this probiotic, had an elevation in their mood and improved natural killer response. That means, again, protective cells in the immune system that support a healthier immune response. So we're really learning that the impact of our state of being in terms of whether we're choosing to be stressed, influences our microbiome and organisms that are supporting health. And likewise, the organisms that are in our microbiome can influence what our response in terms of our mental health and cognition are. So it's a give and take both ways. So where do you start? Because that's a lot of information just on, a very small amount of data. So if you have mental health concerns that you're dealing with, or you're noticing mild cognitive decline, or maybe even more significant cognitive decline, you want to think about working with a functional medicine provider, because they will do a thorough assessment to start to figure out what are the root causes that we need to be looking for. And one of the things that they likely will do will be to assess what gut bugs or organisms are growing in your gut, and to further assess your gut health, as we know that influences cognitive function and mental health. And so the way that they generally are going to do that, or at least start assessing your gut microbiome and gut health, is by ordering what we call a functional stool analysis, which is generally a home test that you collect your stool over a few days, sometimes one day, and we get a report that tells us the different organisms, friend and foe, that are growing in your gut, tells us how well do you digest, how well do you absorb, and just gives us a lot of information that actually can favorably, when we make changes, influence mental health and cognitive function. So how do you start, even if you're not ready to go to a functional medicine provider? Well, we know that gut health and gut bugs are going to be favorably influenced when you decrease the processed foods. We also know decreasing sugar and alcohol is going to be really helpful. Decreasing a lot of these meds that I listed here that are basically gut bug killers. And then adding more healthy probiotic foods, so like a variety of fruits and vegetables, because they will have all the different colors have different phytonutrients that are supportive of your microbiome. Adding more fermented foods like kimchi, fermented pickles, fermented cabbage. If you look at a lot of indigenous cultures, this is a natural part of their mealtime. They have fermented foods on the table that they enjoy. Also, we looked at how impactful decreasing stress or increasing stress impacts your microbiome. So adding meditation to your daily regimen could be an easy, quick way to start. And then lastly, you might think about involving a functional medicine provider, and they'll have a tailored program which may include probiotics. So next steps, where do you go from here? So if you loved this video, you can check out my video on how is my gut inflaming my heart. And I also have one on food reactions and depression, which may be helpful to dive deeper into some of these issues we're speaking about. And I would just say, just take a few of those things on the prior slide that we were speaking to, adding fermented foods, etc., and see how that impacts you. If you do have significant issues, reach out and find a functional medicine provider who can help. Until then, be well.
Welcome to Rupa Health, the best place to order, manage, and track results from over 30 different lab companies in one single place for free. It's going to take you under 2 minutes to sign up, and you can order any functional medicine lab for your client in under 30 seconds. Let me show you how it's done. So here's our beautiful interface. I'm typing in the name of my client, selecting the lab that I want to order for them, and hitting send. From there, Rupa and their amazing team handle the rest. They email the client, collect payment, and even offer an interest-free 3-month payment plan. We've also built the world's largest library of information about chronic health conditions, the lab tests that can help you find the root cause, and the evidence-based interventions that you can use to help people heal from them. It's called the Rupa Health Magazine. There, we have in-depth articles about almost any health condition you can imagine. And we give you step-by-step protocols that other clinicians have used to help their clients heal and that are verified by evidence-based sources. You should totally check it out, and it'll transform your practice. And we can't wait to see you. So make sure you sign up today at rupahealth.com.